Welcome to my crazy homestead. I know it's late. I apologize. I actually need to get this bread started or we're not going to have supper tonight. One of my biggest problems was keeping my ducks in a row. Now I'm bound to see probably one scatter again somewhere, so I apologize if they do. I will begin to tell you that I am going to go from the beginning to the end with you in the process of just making a simple hamburger bun. One of the key things that, which to me, small things matter. Yeast matters. I can show you what a good yeast will look like and explain to you what will happen with bad yeast. The second point I have is temperature of your water, your milk, whatever liquid you use. Most recipes will tell you about 110 degrees. That is prime, it's warm, it cuddles and blankets your yeast and it makes it active. Anything higher than that, you will end up killing your yeast. These are not really taught to many people, and this is what frustrates folks when they go to make bread, because why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? So maybe, and hoping that my videos will teach you the small things that matter and what will help to make successful bread. With that, we will begin. If you have good yeast, this is what it should look like. This is the part I talked about. It should be foamy. This is what you want to see. I added my water to my yeast and I just let it proof to make sure that it's active, and it usually takes between 5 to 10 minutes. And in order to test the temperature to my water, I just use an ordinary simple meat thermometer. It works just as well, nothing fancy, but this is the beginning to where it makes your bread, whether it'll rise or whether it don't. So, and we'll continue on to the next step. Okay, I am using a stand mixer, so if you don't have one, that's fine. You can do this by hand and with a wooden spoon. And I am also going to include the recipe for this, these hamburger buns. So my next step, after I've gotten it where it was pretty foamy, you would add a half a cup of flour. All-purpose flour is perfectly fine. If you have bread flour, you can use that as well. Again, wait till it's foamed up after you add your half a cup of flour whisked in. Once you've reached that stage, the next stage is adding 1 egg, 3 tablespoons of sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and I use Himalayan sea salt. That's basically the only kind we use in this homestead. I like the minerals and stuff from it. And then 3 tablespoons of melted butter. The recipe calls to whisk this in really good, just like so. And then we're going to add our flour in. Now, before I add the flour in, I will discuss something with you on this part too. This really, really matters, and I'm going to have a one-on-one with you. When it comes to adding flour to your bread, there's a few things that I have learned. I've lived in Tennessee and I'm now in Mississippi. I have learned that there is a major humidity level difference in these states. When it comes to adding my flour, I take this into account that some people may have to add less flour than what the recipe said. Some people have to add more flour. So I generally start with, in a recipe like this one, calls for 3 1/3 cups of flour. I will add 2 cups. This way I know that I'm not going to get too much flour, and I can always add a couple tablespoons at a time, a 1/4 cup at a time, anything to where I can get the consistency that the recipe calls for. Now, like this one will call for stickiness on your spatula, but you don't want a whole lot of it. It should be able to stick and come off. there are sticky doughs where you will feel it tacky, but it won't stick to your hands. This is one of those instances on this recipe. So again, just remember your humidity level, altitude, all of this comes into play when you're talking bread. It's always to go less first and then add more if you need it. Don't always go by what the recipe says. Sometimes I have had it where I used every bit of flour that the recipe said. Sometimes I'll end up having to use less than that. Okay, here's our next point. Now, it looks like a globby mess right now. And with the spatula, like the recipe had said, silicone, it doesn't really stick to it. So it's not going to say it's not going to stick to your hands, but it will a little bit, but it shouldn't stick there for a whole lot of it. So you don't want to use a whole lot of flour on your board at this point. Brush away your sides. I like doing this so I can keep it on the side and use it if I need it, just like this. So, and I do a light surface on the bottom of it. And we'll go ahead. Now, this one doesn't require a lot of kneading. All we're going to do is form it. Use a light teaspoon of olive oil in our dish. We're going to put the ball inside of the bowl, and then we're going to allow it to rise. The recipe says for about 2 hours. After this point, I will come back and I will show you how to form your hamburger buns, and then again we're gonna let it rise and bake it after this. Okay, the recipe calls for just tucking it under and forming a ball. So like I said, we're not kneading this. We're just going to gently tuck your dough underneath, flipping it, tucking, flipping and tucking, flipping and tucking until you get a nice ball. That's all we need to do. And at the bottom, it'll look like this. And we're just, like I said, just folding under. You don't want to mess with the dough too much. Just tucking it in. And that's it. And then we'll take a little bit of olive oil. And I'm just going to go ahead and brush my top with it just a little bit. And then the rest of it, I'm going to put it in my bowl. Cover it up with a tea towel or saran wrap. Put it in a nice warm place for about 2 hours or until it doubles in size. After that, we turn around and make our buns. Then we'll again allow it to rise. And I'll take you each step till we get this finished. If you have problems with a house like I do, where it gets kind of cool in here sometimes, and you need a place to put your bread at to make it warm, one of the neat things that I've learned is you can put your oven on to your lowest setting. Now my lowest is 200, so I wouldn't leave it more than maybe a minute or two. Turn it off just enough to heat it in there to keep from being too chilled. Another little thing for anybody who happen to have it, I have an Excalibur dehydrator, and my dehydrator has a bread rising setting. I love that thing, which I'm using it right now. These are a few other things if you end up having a cooler home and need a place to rise, and it won't keep you from, or you won't have to wait several hours for your bread to rise. And I'm hoping these tips are helping you, even if it's just for a little bit. Now, I talked earlier about my ducks becoming out of their row. Well, I kind of have a duck out of place right now. So I will be back with you just as soon as I can. Right now, we're waiting on our bread to rise anyways, so we'll get through this. So our bread, it's been about an hour and a half, and our bread has got a nice rise to it. Now we're going to cut and shape our buns and get them ready for their second rise, which will be about an hour. And I'll show you how to do each piece. Okay, the next step, it's stated, is to dust your dough with flour. And we want to kind of pat this dough to get the air bubbles out and make kind of like a rounded 5 by 10 piece, because we're going to end up cutting 12 buns out of this. So I'm just kind of doing estimated eye. You know, some of these recipes, I will tell you that I found that what they say they get out of them doesn't necessarily mean that's what you'll get. I try to get as close to it as possible, and some I can get spot on. This recipe, from what I've seen from the beginning, might be one of those that might not be so spot on. So we want it to about a 1/2 inch in thickness. So we'll keep pressing it out until we get to that. And then I will go ahead and cut it and show you the next step that we do. While you're doing this, it's just, you're taking all the air bubbles out of it too, pretty much. Not all of it, but most of it. Kind of flatten those bubbles out. And that's pretty much what we do here. And I'll show you the next step. Okay, now it calls for cutting out 12 rolls or 12 buns. So I'm going to go ahead, make my cuts, and see if we can get 12. It looks like I pre-cut it to see if this would work, and I can get 12 out of these. So this is exactly how I'm doing it. And once I get this done, I'll come back and show you how to shape them. Alright, once you get your dough cut, you just want to kind of take and divide them up on your board. Make sure you leave some room so you can shape them. And I'm just about finished here. I'm going to go ahead and put just a little bit, and I don't put a whole lot of flour at once on my board. Remember, we don't want to put too much on it because we want to keep it fluffy and light, and these are very soft. So I just put a little dusting. Now, according to the recipe, it says that we can take these and turn them like a ball. Remember I said about the out and in tucks. Take it like a ball like this, and then flatten it. You want to flatten them till they're about a 1/2 inch thickness, just like so. Pick it up and then put it on your what I'm using here is a silicone mat on top of a baking sheet. So, and that's pretty much what you'll do for the rest of your buns. Once you turn around and get these all set in there, you want them about a 1/2 inch apart on your pan. Cover them up again with your tea towel. Put them in a warm place for about an hour until they double. Once they double, take, in the recipe it called for 1 milk, and I'm not quite sure, remember what it said about the milk, but you take your egg and your milk. Again, I'm including the recipe into the post when I make this. So mix that up really well, lightly. Take a pastry brush and brush your hamburger buns. You want to preheat your oven just before you do this point to 375 and follow the directions. I think it was about 15 minutes once you get the tops brushed, and you will have your own homemade hamburger buns. I hope this video has helped you, and I've really enjoyed working with you. Right now my ducks are completely out of order, so I'm finishing off this video, and I promise I will get better. Love you all, and look forward to talking to you again.